My name is Abu Bara. I am the founder of Black American Muslim Opinions. We are just getting started. Our mission is to openly discuss and examine social issues faced by Black Americans in their communities and formulate solutions that can be implemented in these communities from an Islamic perspective. We need your support to keep the organization going. Your donations will help us do the work necessary to help Black people overcome their social and economic challenges. Visit our website and learn more about what we do. My name is Abu Bara. I am the founder of Black American Muslim Opinions. We are just getting started. Our mission is to openly discuss and examine social issues faced by Black Americans in their communities and formulate solutions that can be implemented in these communities from an Islamic perspective. We need your support to keep the organization going. Your donations will help us do the work necessary to help Black people overcome their social and economic challenges. Visit our website and learn more about what we do. My name is Abu Bara. I am the founder of Black American Muslim Opinions. We are just getting started. Our mission is to openly discuss and examine social issues faced by Black Americans in their communities and formulate solutions that can be implemented in these communities from an Islamic perspective. We need your support to keep the organization going. Your donations will help us do the work necessary to help Black people overcome their social and economic challenges. Visit our website and learn more about what we do. All right, so we live now. I just had started and I was just waiting for you. So we already started the live feed. Uh, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
All right, introduce yourself for our guests, inshallah.
So, my name is Michelle Renee Davis. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I said licensed clinical social worker. Jeez Louise, I'm tired. I'm sorry. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I was just talking to somebody about clinical social worker, but I'm a licensed professional counselor here in Pennsylvania. I provide trauma treatment to, different populations, adults, children, adolescents. So that's basically what I do in a nutshell. And I have my own business called Where Faith Meets Mental Health. And basically, there I just do, psychotherapy and stuff like that with, obviously different populations. And I do accept insurance at this time. Blue Cross Blue Shield, Cigna, Evernorth, ComPsych, and Wellsprings, which is EAP programs.
Okay. So today's discussion is going to be about trauma and child development. And can you please tell our guests what's your specialty in?
My specialty is trauma therapy. So basically, what I do is people come in like they have PTSD, childhood sexual abuse, rapes, poverty, homelessness, domestic abuse, all those different kinds of traumatic experiences. And they come to see me where I basically help them look at their cognitions that happen because of the abuse and help them change the way they think about the abuse and how they can do stuff differently so that it won't impact other people. That whole concept of I didn't cut you, so don't bleed on me. So basically, trying to help them out so that they won't bleed on other people who never did anything to them.
Excellent. So I'm gonna start out with one question. The first question I will have for you related to the topic is how does trauma affect children's development?
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just change it a little bit. How I'm gonna say how it just affects development. Period. Because when a traumatic experience happens, a person gets stuck at the age that they were traumatized. So, for example, if someone had childhood sexual abuse, right? They may have difficulties with relating to people, learning how to have intimate relationships with other people, because that part of development stopped. It never continued on, it got stuck there. So, it's always very, very important to get the children that help when they experience those kinds of things, whether it's physical abuse, emotional or mental abuse. People need to get their children help when that happens.
Okay, so how important is it? I have a question because a lot of time when people talk about children, they forget about the factors about raising children, or what we call in Islam, tarbiyya li atfal, the correct way to raise children. One of the main important factors for raising children, the first step for raising children is picking the right spouse to have children with, correct?
Correct.
So this question would be, how important is it picking the right spouse related to having children? And give us some examples of it, the negative effects when choosing the wrong spouse, how that could affect children.
Well, what I would say is before you think about picking the right spouse, you need to figure out what it is about you that may attract the wrong spouse. Because what happens is we have a habit of blaming the opposite sex for our experiences when we keep recycling our experiences. So it's something in you that's attracting these kinds of people. It has nothing to do with the other person. Yes, they may have done the event, they may have did whatever it is, but you continue to pick them. You ever met a woman who like, dang, every time she get a husband, he beating on her? It's
Right.
something. It's it's characteristics that it's like in our mind it associates, and it just lights up like, oh, this person is more likely to abuse me. So now I am able to do trauma mastery. We call it trauma mastery. So I'm gonna get into these relationships to um I'm getting to these relationships so that I can master what has happened to me. Whether they've seen domestic violence themselves, whether they have been physically abused, or any of those kinds of things. And then they just repeat the cycle over and over and over.
Yeah, I was reading about domestic violence and that most people who are victims of domestic violence or perpetrating domestic violence on somebody most likely grew up in that type of environment. And sometimes women who are traumatized through domestic violence, there's most likely she grew up in a household like that. And
Mm-hmm.
this is why she picked a spouse or a person like this, right? Because she grew up in a household like this, right? So I can understand what you're saying. How does the maternal, how does maternal trauma physically or emotionally uh, affect pregnancy or affect the fetus?
Well, so whenever a woman is pregnant and they're experiencing trauma, right? I'm gonna just say trauma in the present. Because even in the past it still can affect the fetus, but definitely more so when a woman is pregnant, because it raises her cortisol levels. And if anybody knows what cortisol is the fight or flight response. And when that is constantly running in a person because of fear, fight, flight, or freeze, they their child is developing anxious already before they even know what anxiety is, because now they're experiencing a flight or flight because of the cortisol levels that's in them. So then you have these children who are, we call it colic and all that kind of stuff. And, they jump at any, you ever seen some babies, you could play loud music, you could do whatever, and they just be chilling. They calm, cool, collected. Then you have one baby where they jump at anything. And a lot of times, I believe, I'm not gonna say that this is absolutely true, but I believe that a lot of that is because they probably was experiencing some trauma in the womb. So that and then on top of that, trauma changes your genes expression. It gets imprinted on you. That's why that whole generational curse and transference of trauma. Whatever way that people skin the cat, um, it gets imprinted on your DNA. So now you have a family history of high blood pressure. You have no idea a history of diabetes. You don't know why, or cancer, or any of those kinds of things, because the trauma you experience changed the expression of your genes.
No, I have associative minds. I work with, I volunteer with him. He has a nonprofit organization. It's called Muslim with Disability Awareness. So he has autism, and he was telling me that most likely he developed autism when his mother was pregnant with him, because where they at in the UK, he's Irish. That his family was being oppressed at that time, and his mother was actually pregnant while there was like some type of revolution going on, and she was like a prisoner or something like this. And he said that he said he learned that his autism could be directly connected to her being pregnant and the trauma that she was going through at the time. Um,
But it's
so
possible. But I got another theory of autism, which is actually much more fascinating. So, they were, oh goodness, feel like I got trash in my eyes. It was a study done that they said they think that autism was a necessary adaptation to human beings for survival. And reason being is because like how a lot of autistic people, when they get something in their mind, they do it and do it and do it until it's perfected. Us as human beings in general, if we fail at something, we can't keep going. But people who have autism can, like Albert Einstein. He kept going and going and going until he finally got it. And I they were saying that they believe that autistic people probably saved the human race because they didn't give up on stuff. So,
you know, like for example, a lot of black people or black African that have sickle cell trait, like I have sickle cell trait, right? So so sickle cell trait is when your red blood cells are not fully round, they like half. So I look, I had this since you're born with this, correct? So I was looking into it. Most people who have sickle cell trait are from Africa, and it says that in these countries that people have sickle cell trait is known for malaria, right? So people who have sickle cell trait, when they are in these areas and they get bitten by a mosquito that has malaria, most likely they won't get too sick. You know, one of my friends told me this because he was in Vietnam, an elderly friend of mine. He said in Vietnam, when he was looking to draft people, he said he was looking for African Americans in the U.S. military to draft who has sickle cell trait because you will most likely not catch malaria or won't do you so much harm. So we can see that some type of biological things that we see as not normal has some purpose to it, right?
All things have purpose. What?
Well, I mean, it has a purpose to it. I'm sorry, it has a purpose.
Mhm.
Uh, so what about this? So kids who've been traumatized,
Mhm.
how does that affect them as adults?
Um, it can make them very paranoid, hyper vigilant, to danger that's not really there. Um, it can make them interpret situations that's not true. Um, because if something appears like something in the past, it can be very triggering. And if anybody knows anything about triggers, once emotions go up, your ability to reason, think logically goes down. So you become very hyper vigilant about stuff. And I also call it self-fulfilling prophecies, that sometimes we behave in a way that makes things come true. Um, and I'm guilty of it myself. I've had many experiences where I behaved in a way that, either made things come true or exacerbated the situation that wasn't really all the way 100% there. It may be some part of it is there, but not all of it. And so now I'm having this whole um witch like meltdown. And it's not even as bad as it may seem because it seems familiar.
A lot of women do that, though.
A lot of men do that too. It just looks different. It just looks different. Men are very emotional too.
Yeah, for sure, men are very emotional. I understand that
It just
part.
they just don't yell and scream like women do.
All right.
They withdraw, they go into
Mm,
themselves. Um,
very
and what makes
quiet.
yeah, and what
Mm.
makes it even worse is that, with men, they don't have no one to talk to. So it's not even like they can decompress all of that stuff that they got bottled up in them.
Yeah, I met some sisters, some brothers. I mean, married couples when they have marital problems and the woman's really bothering the guy. The husband usually becomes nonverbal and he just shuts it down and he's to himself and he's like going crazy in his own mind.
Mm.
Uh,
But that's trauma related, but also him shutting down, being quiet, and ignoring the problem's still going to be there. So learning effective communications is very, very important. Um, and again, when things look similar to old patterns, it's hard to get caught up. I mean, it's hard not to get caught up in what appears to be true versus what is reality. Because our feelings make us feel like things are true. And it's funny because I tell clients all the time, I say your feelings are not real. They're real to you. They're your reality, but it's not the reality. Reality is just logical chains of events that just happen. We assign negativity or positivity to the event.
so next question, does neglect such as financial and poverty being raised by one parent contribute to developmental issues in children and affect their adulthood?
Absolutely. Poverty is the number one indicator of later trauma. What has she never seen it that way? I don't know.
Would you just explain? Would you just
Oh,
explain before?
uh, so when someone is impoverished, right? Number one, if I don't, if I don't, that makes the parents higher stress, right? So what happens is, and I see it a lot of times, even when I walk out my door. I actually just saw this either this morning or the other morning, when this mother, who more than likely probably is impoverished, saying to her child, why the F is it taking so long for you to get out the effing house? Like, you need to hurry up. But then you're going to wonder why they get F's in school.
We have a lot of that in the
I
black
have a lot
community.
of stuff on my mind.
We have a lot of the black community. A lot of us grew up like that. Your
Yeah,
parents
many
said
of us grew
things
up
to
like
us.
that.
It's not normal. We see it as normal in our culture, but it's not normal, and it does affect the child in a negative way. But the parents don't see it that way. Like, I could remember kids I grew up with, their parents saying, "Oh, you stupid like your father," or "You're gonna be no good like your father." I heard a lot of these things. People used to say these things to their children and things like that, and sometimes that stuff affect the child growing up.
I know sometimes it is. Because then it tells a child either one, they become an overachiever, all anal, like they got to do everything right, and it stresses everybody else out because they anal, or they become like, hey, what's the point in trying when all I'm going to be is nothing for good anyway? What's the point? And I think that's
So,
very important.
what type of social and psychological behavior issues does traumatized children have as adults? Can you give us examples?
So, um, let's just say, so like classic things with, like, I'm gonna just say sexual trauma. Either they become hypersexualized or they have no sexual desires at all. With physical abuse, a lot of times what they do is they may get into relationships with people who are physically abusive, or they become physically abusive. So usually it's always the extreme end of stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, it's certain things that may influence, certain behaviors and things like that. Um, like, so if you have someone like with substance use problems, it could be a number of reasons, a plethora of reasons why they started using. But I remember I had someone who told me, a friend of mine who, she said the first time she used dope, she said she remembers her saying, "I can now live."
Say it again, because it kind of say that again.
She said the first time she used dope, she said to herself, "I can finally live."
What she mean by that though?
Meaning basically like when you are so stressed out, because this is what the thing about with heroin. With heroin, when you use heroin, it gives you a sense of, it makes you feel free. Um, it actually eases, like the first time you use opiates, people think that you be high slumped over like how they are on Kinston. That's not actually true. If anyone who had like C-sections and stuff like that who has been prescribed opiates, they know it does not do that. So when I had surgery a few years ago, they gave me fentanyl. Now everybody know what fentanyl is, an opiate. It's like one of the strongest one out there. You know what I went and did when I went home? I cleaned my whole house. When I tell you, you could lick the floor. You could, because it makes you feel like you got so much energy. You can do this, you can do that. And it's like, oh my God, this is great. But the flip side is if you keep using it, it becomes to a point that you are getting high all the time. And then you need more and more and more and more to feel the same relief that you got the first time. And then after a while, the sad part about it is, um, the sad part about opiates is that eventually you no longer get high. People think that people that's using it, like they just always get high. You no longer get high. It doesn't work anymore
Get tolerance for it.
because they're tolerance. So what happens is now they're just using so they won't get sick. And that's why they all sweaty. Because if you stop opiates abruptly, it won't kill you, but it's going to give you diarrhea. It's going to give you bad cramping, nose running, diarrhea, vomiting. So a lot of times they keep using because they're afraid of getting sick.
I see someone be crying in the street. I see someone be crying in the street. Like I grew up with some people. I'm in my 40s now, my mid 40s now, and you know, I look at some of the people I grew up with. Like, we never thought this guy would be strung out on opioids. But one day I was walking, and my man used to be like the gangster back in the day. I see him now. He be crying, be on opioids, crying in the street all the time, high. And I'd be like, yo, what's up, man? We need to get you some help. But he doesn't want to get any help. Why they be crying? That's what I want to know. He be crying, man.
Wouldn't you be crying if you're a slave to a drug?
He be crying, man. And we
I
be
would
trying
be
to help
happy
him
too.
and be like, yo, we'd never think this guy here would have been like this. Out of all of our people we grew up with, we would say, this guy never be this way. Now, we see him in the street crying. I'm like,
I would be crying too. And a lot and I feel like with men when it comes to trauma and child development, they have it worse. Y'all have it so much worse because it's not okay for y'all to talk about it. And I was just talking to somebody else about this where I said, we especially when it comes to sexual abuse, we sexualize our children a lot. Some of these little girls, I was like, why is her jeans that tight and her shirt that tight? She looks like a grown woman. And then you'll have men staring in broad daylight. They don't even care anymore that they're looking at children. And you'll tell. Then you have the neighbors. She gonna be fast. Fast where? Fast on the track? Because like people got to be intentional when they say things to people because they don't know what it can incite and stuff they already are dealing with. And then even with boys, and the reason I said they have it worse because if you're 14, 15, you had sex with a grown woman, they like, oh, you the man. No, it's abuse.
yeah, you the man. Growing up, you the man. Matter of fact, it's like something to boast about. Like once I was talking to a brother, and we was talking about how in our society, if you are like the male who's like a pimp, he has another word he was using. Is like we teach our males to be this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, in society, but that's not normal. And then when the females or people start complaining about how the men are abusive or don't take care of responsibilities related to women, but in our society, especially you can see in the rap music, this is
Mm-hmm.
what we're pushing. We're pushing this. And if the guy who's not like this, he's like something's wrong with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know. So that will go into the next question, I think. Does divorce, separation, single parenthood, different boyfriends, and drug abuse prone the child to be abusive and traumatized? Are they open to these things? Because
They
of
are they are
mm,
open to them and abuse and whenever like divorce is one of the worst things for children. Um and and that's second to being silenced in a home. One of the things that I was just talking about and another platform is one of the biggest traumas for the African American community is their whole concept of what goes on in my house stays in my house. So if I'm being abused, I can't say anything. Nobody's nobody's here to protect me. And so you grow up and then some of the things we normalize on top of it. So then we grow up and we repeat the cycle all over again. That whole at the end of it all, our guide is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he never hit a child. Why do
mm,
we think that we should go and beat the crap out of our child?
get it, that comes from slavery.
It
That's how
is.
it's
It
from
is.
slavery.
And my whole since raising my son, I have a son that's 12 years old. The for Since he started school, probably like 5 to I want to say fourth or fifth grade, he used to get a beating once a year.
Oh, you?
I get a beating once a year.
Why? Just in case by acting up?
Sometimes he need to be reminded that I will whip him, but
As I said it.
in
In
but
case you
in
think about
general,
acting up. Yeah.
I never had to. We always had conversations. That's when they can learn. Kids are
Mhm.
going to make mistakes, but you yelling at them is not going to help them learn. So even when I was about to beat his behind, I used to always had it was by the time he was getting the beating, we already had the conversation 3 or 4 times. And then even when he about to get it, I said, hey, Why you think you're about to get this beating? What could you have done differently so you wouldn't get this beating? And we would literally have a conversation about it. And then I'd be his behind. Because I told you I was going to. Because I got to do what I said I was going to do. So that has
But
been
can I be something else also? Because
what?
growing up, I can remember, I can remember sometimes when the mother used to beat kids, especially mothers. The kid looks like the father, so
That's ridiculous.
sometimes the mother's mad with the father. She take it out on the child that looks like him.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
I
But
have one that
when
happened
people
to one
do
of my
that,
kids because I have three kids, right, with the same woman. And I'm divorced from the mother for a few years. The one who looks like me is like he don't get everything. When like time for her to spend money or whatever buying stuff, she don't buy him everything he wants. She buy the kids that look just like her everything he wants. And then when like some like I think the kids be fighting in the house, she never defends them. She always defend the other kids who are older than him, actually, right? So I said to him one day, I said, because you look like me, so when your mother's mad at me, she gonna be mad at you.
I
Sometimes
wouldn't
women
say
do
that.
that also when they get
I,
mad with the child, if it looks like the father and they mad with the
yeah,
father.
I think that moving forward, what you should do is say, I understand. Let him talk about it. Let him get talk about all his problems and stuff like that. But then I would remind him, like, I know that it's not right, it's not fair, but everybody has their struggles. Everybody is going through things, and sometimes people do things that they shouldn't do because of some of the pain that's inside. Reason being is because what happens is it gives people empathy. So then when things are happening, it allows them to not internalize it, because what you're doing is saying, oh, because it's me. So what you're saying is their behavior is okay because it's directed at someone. No, it's not okay. Sometimes people have problems and they're hurting, and sometimes they need some help. So give grace, kindness to her because she needs it the most. When she now, that's not to say don't teach boundaries, because that's a whole different concept. Just because someone treats you like that doesn't mean you have to take it and accept it. It's not okay to be treated that way. And one of these days, you and your mother can probably have a conversation about this, about how you want to be treated. It's teaching them communication, and it's teaching them empathy. So then when they go into a marriage, and if their wife having some problems, they automatically say, Dad, what is it about you that you are really struggling with? I'm just a trigger. What is it that you're really struggling with? But also saying, but this behavior is not going to be tolerated.
But that takes a lot of maturity. I mean, that takes
Does.
maturity, a
And
lot
that's
of
why
maturity.
you have
People don't
parents.
have.
But that's why
Some
you have parents.
parents don't have that maturity.
We're not talking about parents. We're talking about you and yours. Everybody going to come to their level of maturity at whenever time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has for them. And inshallah, I hope that, somebody's watching this and they say, you know what, I can do stuff differently and talk to my children differently. And I'm going to give a story, an example, because my 12-year-old one time sent me this YouTube video when it was saying sexually explicit things, but not, uh, what do you call it? It wasn't like obvious. It was like little,
Oh,
yeah,
hidden.
insidious little jokes.
Mm.
So most parents like, what the F you, blah, blah, blah. But see, this is what it taught me. It taught me that one, my son felt comfortable to talk to me. So I want to keep that dialogue open. Because if I would have shut it down, then things that he are going through, he won't be able to. But I brought him in and I said, hey, what you sent me was inappropriate. I'm your mother. I'm not your friend. I said, but also that's inappropriate to send to a friend also. I said, those kinds of things. I said, now, if you having sexual desires, because he's 12, I said, we can start talking about that topic of marriage and what that would look like and if you're ready and blah, blah, blah. I said, or I said, you can talk to, because I was married at the time, so you could talk to my husband about it, and y'all can have those conversations. I said, but you have other male adults that you can talk to if you are starting to have sexual desires that you want to explore. He was like, no, 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 no. Normally, I don't watch stuff like that too. And I believe him because I go through his phone because I'm not going to listen. You believe, but verify. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I go through his phone. So I know he don't normally watch it because I go through his YouTube and all that kind of stuff to see what he's watching, what he's listening to, and all that other kind of stuff. So I said, yes, I get that. And I said, and with social media, you have to allow your children to feel comfortable with talking to you because they're going to do it. They're going to do it because their friends, their peers is plastered everywhere.
And the environment is definitely everywhere. Everybody, especially kids, they're exposed to a lot on the internet.
Mm.
Unfortunately.
And every now and then I still ask him. I be like, hey, do you like anybody? He be like, no. I be like, you don't like no girls? He be like, no. I be like, do you like boys? He be like, no. Listen, I'm just making sure. I'm just checking because you got to ask those questions because you don't know.
I know, like my son, I ask him that. My oldest, I ask him that all the time. Like, what type of girl you want to marry? You like Latina? You like black? You like out of his mother's out of? I said, what you like? He's like, oh, I like Caribbean. So I said, okay. I was like, okay. So I asked him these things, and I'm like, I was like, anybody in your school? Any girl in your school? He's like, oh yeah, this is sister. She's like Puerto Rican and Yemeni, right? Because his mother is out. So I said, you like her? He's like, oh, the father, he's black. I see him all the time. I talk to him after school and stuff. I said, but is she pretty? He's like, she's a little bit overweight. I said, okay. I know I asked him these things, right? Because I know at his age, I was thinking about all this, and he acts like me, right? So I'm like, maybe he's, his mind is there. And I even asked him, because, me and his mother's divorced. So I ask him all the time. I'm like, do you want your mother to remarry? And he'd be sitting down, he'd be thinking, he'd be like, nah, no. I said, why you don't want your mom to remarry? He's like, she scream and yell too much, and whoever marry her going to be fighting with her all the time. I laugh because his mother be always be fighting with me, right? So I'm saying, but if your mother is married, she won't be bothering you all the time.
Kind of lost telling them kids that. But
yeah, man, he's like he be thinking. That's why I always ask to see where his head is at. I always gotta ask him to see where he's at because I want to know if he's slow. What I gotta teach him. If he's slow, I gotta teach him some other stuff. Because we live in a society, in New York. I'm from New York. You from Philly. We live in really fast society. So I gotta see, is this guy gonna be the smart kid who need to go to Harvard, or he need one of these kids gonna be a little bit slow? Might have to go to a technical school for a couple of years or something. So I asked him to see where their minds at.
First of all, I want you to not associate slowness with going to a technical school. There's nothing wrong with getting a trade.
I know there's nothing wrong with getting a trade, but sometimes you got to see where the kids are at. Some kids might not want to go to college, right? So I ask him, I talk with him and see, school stuff, because his behavior is crazy in school. So I talk with him, to see where his mind is at and to reason with him, right? Because I told him he has his, like, for my son, my oldest, his mom, this guy get away with murder in school. So, I had a conversation with his dean last week, and she's like, yo, it's too early in the school year for your son to be acting up, and this guy is like so bad. So I told her, I talked to him because she said the mom always with him, always agree with him. So I asked him how to sit down with him, and I just asked him, I'm like, yo, man, what you doing in school for the beginning of the school year, getting in trouble? It's like, yo, there's a kid in school, is his friend, they be playing around. I'm like, you had bad grades last year and you was playing around. I'm like, most likely you're gonna get the same report card. I'm like, you want to go to summer school, you want to get left back, and if you don't do good in school, girls don't like dumb guys. I told him straight up, if you want to get married one day, the women don't like no dumb guy. I said, yo, if you can't get good grades in school, can't get a job, you ain't gonna get the type of woman you need to marry. So he sat down and listened. He was thinking. I'm like, yo, your mom, if you could manipulate your mom to agree with whatever you do wrong and she's with you, I said, how long that's going to work? What happens if you get a real job? You have to work, you have responsibilities. Your mom can't come to your job and save you. So I'm like, yo, you could fool your mom, but what, you're not helping yourself. Then I said, the teachers in your school are all female. If you could do this with your mom, you should help manipulate the teachers at least to get the type of grades and help you need if you was real smart. He was sitting down thinking, his principal and the dean, she emailed me the other day, like, yo, your son is behaving well in school now. I'm like, oh yeah, I had a good talk with this guy. I'm like, yo, if you could manipulate your mother, why not you can manipulate the teacher to give you the grades or the extra help that you need in school? Kids, man, that's my kids though, man. That's kids are like I don't know, because my kids are half Egyptian, so Egyptian kids think different. But I notice with kids, if their parents have like issues or personal issues, some kids they know how to take advantage of that. Some kids are hurt by it, and some kids take that stuff to their advantage. Like, I could get away with murder now. Mom's stressed about this. The father, he's worrying about something else. It's time for me to get whatever I want. I can do whatever I want. So I do
No,
look
let
at
me tell
some
you
of.
something. No, let me tell you something. So I don't think Egyptian kids think differently than any other kids. Kids ain't that bright. They just not. I mean, think about it. Just think about when a kid do something, they be like, "Oh my goodness, I already did that a million times." No kid is smart. They think they smart. They're not smart. But the thing about it is behaviors are always a reflection. Kids' behavior is always a reflection of the parents. Period. Based off of people's temperament is when they'll do if they try to take advantage or not. But I don't even think it's that it's trying to take advantage. Actually, that's a lot of anxiety. And what happens is they become impulsive. And so it may seem like they're taking advantage, but kids love boundaries. Boundaries make kids feel safe. Just like if you was to come into my house, right? And I don't say, take off your shoes, right? And then you sit down, and I'm like, why you got your shoes on? You be like, well, I ain't even know. Like, what's going on? And then I'll be like, so I'm sitting there, dinner served, and then you go to get some food. And I'm like, no, I serve everybody. Don't touch my food. Then it's like, well, if you tell me the rules, I don't know how to behave. Boundaries make people feel comfortable, even adults, because they know what is expected of them. It's the same with kids too. It makes them actually feel more safe. And the behavior that they explain is really just anxiety.
Anxiety. Mm.
It may seem like, oh, they're trying to get over, they're trying to do this. No, it's just impulsive behaviors that's produced by anxiety because they really don't even know what they should or shouldn't be doing because there's no structure.
I think that makes type of sense. So what are some of the signs that kids are having trauma? For the outsider or for the parent or a social worker, or what's the signs for us that this child has some type of trauma with them?
Obviously bad behavior. But to be perfectly honest, it's kind of hard. It's harder with children because it can go so many different ways. But bedwetting is one, feces smearing is one. Obviously bad behavior, but also becoming more quiet than usual. Like the quiet children, I always tell people, quiet and extremely happy kids scare me the most. They scare me the most because quiet kids, you don't know what's going on, but the ones that is happy, no one's always happy. No
Mhm.
one. They're like,
What
oh,
about what about cutting? Kids will be cutting themselves.
oh, absolutely. I heard a lot of kids that said when they come, they say it feels like it releases a lot of pressure, and stuff like that.
One of them told me that, yeah. 'Cause I
Mhm.
know one has some trauma, and this guy be cutting himself, and I'm like, what? He's like a teenager too, like 15, 16. I'm like, why are you cutting yourself? Then one day he exposed him. He has his parents are same sex marriage,
Ugh.
so he's in one of those, he's in one of those households, and this kid was telling me what's going on in his house and the fighting, and he's like he can't say nothing to the person because it's the mother's lover, and
I was two
this
women too.
these
Ooh.
two women, yeah, and he be cutting himself, and I'm like, he said that's the only way we relieve him of the problem because he can't say nothing to the lover, he said he can't say nothing, he be cutting up himself, and I was like, oh, that's deep, that's very deep of the cutting. What about traumatized children do with
Oh, I didn't even finish. It's also bulimia, anorexia, like I mean anything you could substance use, like anything you could think of, it really could be is an indication of some trauma.
mm, mm, mm,
OCD
interesting.
behaviors, um, just
OCD, you said?
yeah, OCD behaviors. Yeah.
That's interesting. Um, what else? Like for example, I give you for example, we was watching the news yesterday, and there's on the news here in New York, somebody, this guy cut up his girlfriend and put her in suitcases and left her there, right, in her apartment. So we was watching the news, and my mom is elderly. She was like, he said that kid probably the person who did it, he probably was traumatized when he was a kid, probably was raped by one of his parents. People who do crimes like this, is there some type of connection between their childhood and being abused or having certain type of trauma and not getting treatment for it, and then when they grow up as adults, they have behaviors like this? Well,
Yeah.
I think he's just a criminal, huh?
No, no. So you gotta think about it like this, right? When a baby is born, what did the law say? That they are born what? Right. So no one, when they're born, in their mind is going to be a murderer. Things happen in between that. And that's just the reality of it.
Can it be like traumatized as a kid by abuse by the parent or
Absolutely. It,
body?
but it could be a multitude of things. Um, it could be like in my household, you know how it is with black people. Will be like, you better fight them and you better beat them up, or I'm gonna beat you when you get home. It desensitizes you to fighting. It desensitizes you to harming people. And so, and I'm just want to share this about myself, because I was arrested a few years ago, um, because I stabbed someone, right? And the guilt that I feel
Hmm.
is none.
Another female or male? Female or male?
Another male, and I don't feel any. Don't laugh. I don't feel any guilt about it. And it's sad because that shows how desensitized I was to that. Because growing up, listen, one time I watched my mom, she stabbed him in the chest, she stabbed him in the back, and she cut his calf so bad that the meat was coming out of it. I seen it, all of it. Um, and the reason why she did this is because she found out that he was showing me and my friend pornographic videos. So it desensitized me to that type of violence. Um, Alhamdulillah, obviously, like I ain't do him as bad as my mother did, and the detectives when they came out and saw what happened, they dropped the charges because it all happened because he started beating up my sister. But even still, him with that whole situation, he watched his mother get beat by his dad, which desensitized him to beating women. And then so now you got two people who have experienced a lot come together trying to master their trauma with each other. And
Hmm.
that's a recipe for disaster. So
Because
people have to work on themselves.
because if I'm watching this particular news case, they interviewed some of the people in the building, and they were saying that these people used to have fighting in the hallway. Women been
Mhm.
bleeding, blood all over the street all the time, or in this hallway, and always fighting. And some of them were not surprised that this happened to her. So I was saying to myself that I know this is domestic violence, but I was saying that maybe the person who did this to her, you know, maybe he grew up in an environment where these things were done, and it went beyond the limits where he should have maybe have some restraint, and he didn't, and it allowed him to, do this to women. But unfortunately, this is very common in New York now. Matter of fact, the same place where it happened, maybe 6 months ago, they found like 3 women chopped up in the bag from a different person who has
Mhm.
mentally ill, who confessed to killing a woman, who was recently released from prison, and he was in prison for the same type of thing, right? And he said that he don't like women because he dressed like a woman himself. This guy, he said he was like molested by women when he was growing up, so he hated women. and that's why he killed all these women and threw them in the bag and stuff like that.
Mm.
So I was just trying to connect between people who've been traumatized, kids as youth, I mean, as kids, and when they get adults, sometimes maybe that leads them to have certain type of bad behavior. Now, what about some of the culture in the Black community in particular,
Drug,
that,
drug, sex,
that
and money. Drug, sex, and money. Drug, sex, and money. That's how, like, and so now everybody's trying to cope that way.
somebody on
Oh,
kill
and
their
that's
man?
and you know what's so you know what the thing of it is, and which is even more sad is that women in America get more time for killing her husband than a man is for killing his wife. A man can literally kill two wives in a lifetime. A woman can't.
I've noticed that in the news lately, like different court cases.
But do you know why?
Why?
Because in America's minds, wives are still considered property.
Somehow legally.
Mhm. Well, in people's minds, they still consider.
You, you remember that girl? I think I have. I was gonna do a news report on her. This Black girl who killed the guy who was trafficking her.
Mhm.
That white guy, and they letting all these other white girls go, but they won't let her go. And this guy was like selling her and everything. And
Mhm.
she killed him and got away. And they was like, nah, they want her to stay in jail. So I was looking into that. I'm like, why you want this female to stay in jail? She killed the guy who was raping her and selling her, and she's a minor on top of that. Yeah, and I was like, whoa, that's deep.
Because it's about mental. See, this is the thing that people don't understand about mentality and words. Because you can have a belief system that you're not even aware of that you have, right? So one of the things that, and I'm gonna just say this: when every time you ever hear a guy say, "Yeah, I'm about to go back to the crib," right?
I remember we talked
Crib is
about
a
this.
Yeah, a crib is symbolizing a baby that's being what nursed by the mother. Guess where they usually live? With
With
their
their
mother.
mom. With their mom.
You never seen any man. I have never seen, give me one and make me a liar. I have never yet found a man who says, I'm about to go back to the crib and it's their house and they pay for that home and it's just theirs.
Yeah,
Never.
I think that's black. It's like a lot of Black culture, inner city.
But it's a
Uh,
mentality, is what I'm
it's a
saying.
mentality. Yeah,
So when
like that
you're,
movie, Baby Boy. That movie.
yes, yes.
Right?
So,
Yeah.
what's in the heart comes out in behaviors and words. And we don't even realize that some of the things that we are saying don't even make sense. You know, so just like even thinking about, like I always tell people, think about why you do the things that you do, why you say the things that you do. Because one of the things that I always tell people is like, one of the things that I want to be is a kind, caring person. That's who I am inherently. That's who I was meant to be. However, I have Katana over here. I'm gonna say Katana because from Mortal Kombat, I like my Katana. I have Katana over here that's gonna be like, no, girl, you can whoop that behind real quick, and so it's always that struggle against that because Katana is not who I am. Katana is who I was. I was made and bred to be that. Because growing up, I remember used to like my mom was like, "You better go out there and fight." I used to cry, tears, like I don't want to fight. Blah blah blah. Now it wouldn't even be a second thought. Like, oh, she trying to fight? Okay, what's up? Like, we can have this, and that's not okay because that's not who I am. That's who I was bred to be. And sometimes we
But
don't realize
would
that
I
we.
go? Does that go back to because the environment that we are in, the environment make us who we are? What's
It's
called maladaptation, something like that. The next some like this.
So it's a combination of bio and environment because if I'm more of a anxious person, right? Um I don't really see people that have a lot of anxiety and stuff like that ready to fight regardless of how much an environment try to produce that. So biology do because we all have our own temperament, so when you're born you have your own temperament. And so when you compact that with different environmental stressor, it makes you go different ways. Just like when I said, like with the sexual abuse, somebody might become hypersexualized and someone may not. And it's because the person who may become hypersexualized or have a temperament of high risk behaviors already, which is not a bad thing to have high risk behaviors, because certain things are needed. If you want to, what is they call when they build the bridges and stuff like that? I mean, you got to be a little crazy and have high risk behaviors to go over those deep oceans and be trying to build bridges underground and going into space. That's taking a risk. You have to be able to do that. But when somebody try to pervert it, it may become into other things like violence and, you know, sexual addiction or substance use, because you're more geared to high risk behaviors.
But it's not like high sex risk behavior comes from people who are diagnosed with being bipolar, because this when they go through their manic stage, they are, for some of the women, for example, they have many sexual partners and they take risk. Even if they're married or in a relationship, they would take risk
That's a
because
symptom. That's a
Mm.
symptom of bipolar disorder, but that's in my experience, that's usually not the first things that they go to. Most of the time it's spending money and thinking that they all in a bag
But
of
they do both. They do both. They do all
yeah,
of that. They spend all their
yeah, but
money, then they,
yeah,
because
but
I
it's
know. Mm.
no, but what I'm saying is you may perceive something as mania and they have bipolar disorder when it could really just be trauma and PTSD. See, a lot of those symptoms, well, I'm a person that I'm not a fan of the DSM-5, like psychiatric disorders.
Oh yeah,
Because
I have the book right here. Yes,
listen, listen,
right here.
if you crack it open and you look at anxiety, bipolar disorder, depression, and borderline personality disorder, all of those symptoms overlap. All of them. So you
Mm-mm,
don't know one from another. Now,
mm.
granted, I do some certain things that I'll be like, oh, I know it's this or that, but really it has no scientific basis. What they say is reliable, but it has no validity.
Mm.
The
You
diagnosis
know,
is there. You can
but
diagnose
but but
it, but it's
but
not.
psychology, with psychology, psychology is always an evolving. Like some theories become, next maybe 10 years, some theories they have now, people refute those theories with another theory.
Mhm,
So those things are always changing, especially with psychology.
mhm,
Um, but I wanted to discuss, because I think a lot of the African American community, especially the Muslim African American Muslim community, because I think we a lot of us were in denial
mhm,
about certain type of trauma, where it comes from, where it stems, how it affects children. I think a lot in our community we in denial about it,
mhm.
and we look at a diluted version of Islam, or a version of Islam that we make up, uh, to use an excuse not to deal with these issues. Like, for example, I know, like in Philadelphia and other places, I know in the Muslim community, have Muslim kids committing suicide in the Black African American community,
Mhm.
right? A lot of people are not addressing these issues. And they're not talking about why their children are committing suicide. And it's because it might be trauma. It might be, I was looking in Germantown Masjid, right? Um, I'm not a big fan of Germantown Masjid, and I have noticed over the years from dealing with Germantown Masjid, a lot of the sisters and the kids in the community, they messed up. They own drugs. They have sexual deviancy, sexual identity problems, can't keep marriages. And I tell some of the people that I know who come out of this community, because they have a cult understanding of Islam, and the people in their community, they live in foul. They're not living according to Quran and
But
Sunnah.
but what I would have to say though is
Mm.
that in my experience, being in Philadelphia, being a therapist, it's across the board. I've got clients from California. I got clients from Wisconsin. I got clients like in different states, and they are all experiencing the same thing. The only difference between Philly and other places is we dumb enough to put our stuff on blast. We let the whole world know.
He got no shame. I know Philly ain't got no
It's
shame.
no, it's no shame over here. It's, we have, isn't it called Hayat? Like,
No shame. I know Philly got no shame. Trust
we
me, I
don't
know.
have none, and that's
Oh,
really
high at all. Trust me, I know.
that's
I
the
know.
problem.
Dude got the Jew mark on his head, big beard, talking about he gonna go bang this female. I say, man, trust me, I don't feel Philly real good.
Listen, I've seen brothers. Well, not seen. I've heard of brothers going in, like, because I work in addiction, so I seen, got different. Where they're like, yeah, these Muslim brothers, they be all on me. I was like, "Subhanallah." He said this brother came in one time. He was like, "Yo, can I get your number?" He's like, "I thought he was talking to, you know, the Muslim sister was next to me." He like, "No, not her, you." Just like he didn't even say like, "Can you come here?" Like pull him to the side. Nothing. Nothing.
I know Philly's bad, man. I stopped the law.
Okay.
It's real
How
bad.
old was lad? Like, but my thing is, a lot of times, and even with homosexuality, and I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack for it because I say it all the time. I have yet meet one person who is homosexual, trans, or anything that does not have trauma with their parents. I haven't met one. Now, granted, is there some biological basis to some people's claims? Absolutely. And what I mean by that is that, what is it? Intersex people, people who are born with both parts, and some of them they do, but at the end of the day, with Islam, it says you are supposed to live your life with the gender that it's expressed. So, regardless of if you have a vagina on the outside, but you found out that you had testes on the inside, no, you can't date women. You have to date men. Well, no, you actually can't get married. But being as what I'm saying is that you may not know all the time that you have this issue. So regardless, you're supposed to be with the gender that is expressed. But I'm quite sure, and I'm not a scientist, but this is my personal opinion. I'm quite sure there's probably like 0.0000001 of the population that really have some intersex issues. I can't tell you how many times over and over. Like I even had a session with a guy who's homosexual, and he was talking about being with some married men or whatever. And we talking about it and blah 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 blah. And then he's like, I don't know why I keep getting into these relationships. I said, who was your first heartbreak? And he looking at me, and I'm looking at him. And we just looking at each other. And then, because he knew where I was going, he was like, my father. Yes, your father. He abandoned you. He neglected you. And now you think that warming your bed with another man is going to make you feel comforting.
Is that also saying for females who have issues with men because their father they didn't get that attention from their father, so they try to look for it from different.
It could be a host of reasons because that could be true. But also it could be the opposite where now they fiending for a man's attention so much that they hop from relationship to relationship. They can't be alone. Every time you turn around, they're in a new relationship. But also it could be from the mom. So a lot of women get bitter after a breakup. They get bitter, and they'll talk about the father with the child like she's their friend. Your child is not your friend. You know what that's called? It's called emotional incest. That's what it is. When you rely on your child to make you feel better and talk about to them about inappropriate emotional things that you are supposed to talk to with your girlfriends, it's emotional incest. And I think we don't talk about that enough in our community either, because I see that a lot with women. Women will use their sons as their husbands. And it's like, I always be like, no, he is not your husband. I actually had a girl tell me like, oh, because I'm having some heart issues, so I'm going to the doctors and stuff about it. And my girlfriend was like, did you tell your sons about it? No, my son is 12 and 8. Tell them what?
Even understand that concept,
Yeah, tell them what?
I give him anxiety, actually.
Yeah, like for what? Like, I'm not telling them that. Absolutely not. She was like, well, I would because, and my son would tell me, like, Mom, you too stressed out. She's like, so when people will call my phone, she'd answer and tell them, no, she's not doing well. Who was that? Yes, Mom. You had me scared. I thought the kids was here. Oh, thank you. See, my mom loves me. It's got me some chocolate. But even what was I going? I hate when I do that. Oh, and she was just saying like she would her son would do that for her. I said, that's not your husband. That's not your husband. That's inappropriate. Now, granted, if I was dying, that would be something different. Like, mommy's sick. I'm not going to be here longer, because I want them to prepare themselves and be able to have closure with me. But right now, at this point in junction, I don't think I'm dying, you know, by the permission of Allah. Like, I'm not dying. So I'm not going to tell them that. I'm not going to create anxiety and worry in them. And it's not appropriate. That's why I can go get a husband. That's when I can talk to my friends about stuff. And we need to talk about that emotional incest that we have. And I get it because even with my mom, we had a very tumultuous relationship. It just started getting better lately when I had to realize that my mom had her own traumas and problems and stuff like that. And she did the best that she could with the information that she had. And the best thing that I can do is heal some so that I won't pass it on to my children. And hopefully they'll continue that process because I ain't perfect. So I know that I'll inject them up somewhere along the line. And then they have to heal and keep passing it on so we have well-rounded children.
That's very true. That's I was thinking about a associate I know, Billy, actually, a brother. He apostated from Islam not so long ago, and I was trying to talk with him. I know he suffered from he's been diagnosed, I think, last year with uh, being bipolar, and he had, somebody killed his son in the Muslim community, and there was a lot of things that happened to him, and he just left.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, some of the brothers, he used to be on YouTube also, and some of the brothers, you know, I looked at his issue different from them. Some of them looked at his issue as him just apostating. I looked at his issue as mental health and how it's really not geared towards how the Muslim community, Afro American Muslim community, when it comes to mental health, we're not really taking it too serious, and a lot of people in our community are affected with it. But I was thinking about him and his some things, even in his childhood, he was traumatized. Even I think his birth, I think his mother was raped. That's like how he came about, and things like this. And I was really sitting and thinking that we have a lot of these type of stories. And I read your book, right? Also, we have a lot of these type of things that do go on in our community, but a lot, it seems like in the African American Muslim community, certain portions of them don't want to talk about mental health. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't know how to address it at all. They see what's going on, but they don't know how to address it from the Islamic point of view, because
Mm-hmm.
there is psychology in Islam, and they don't. It's like, then they're the ones who children or women or brothers are affected with the most. So
Mm-hmm.
I was that's why I really try to do these videos with you to bring about some of these topics, especially trauma. We have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that in the community. Mm.
And even it's so funny because with the book, I titled it in a way just to grab people's attentions. And even though it's obviously from a woman's perspective and all the stuff that I've been through with men, but what I want to say too is for men, if they decide to read it, just take out me being a woman and put yourself there because even men, I see men going through this too. I see men going through this too with being in real toxic situations, and they're good men and they just drag through the mud um, because of somebody else's trauma or because their own trauma, and they keep getting into these relationships. And I just think that it's interesting that because even like when I wrote it in a way to make it a little comical. As you know, like at first, I just made it like stories, but it's a lot of pain, but through those words too. And I just want people to understand that you, the healing, which is a journey, is possible because there's a lot of things that I wrote in that book that I no longer do at all. that it's like I have no desire to do it. I haven't thought about doing it or any of those things. And, that's when it comes to having faith and work. Like you have to do those too. Now, granted, I still got some things that I'm struggling with. Well, I have one thing on my top list that I'm struggling with that I'm trying to really, really get through. But that's something that I believe that by the permission of Allah, I can get through it. It's just I have to actively do it. I feel like I haven't actively been working on it like I should have been. But one of the things that I am doing, if anybody was ever interested, I'm actually going to get a brain scan in New York in like 2 weeks, to see how my brain is functioning, to make sure that it's functioning at this optimal level. Because in mental health, in every medical discipline, we look at the body when something is happening, except mental health. So I might be experiencing, so like say for example, if I was exposed to mold, right? Those being exposed to that or lead, it can mimic mental health symptoms. So why haven't we, when somebody get diagnosed with something, that we don't look at the biological aspects of what may be happening? Having an underactive or hyperactive thyroids can impact your mental health. I believe it's depression, if I'm correct. But
And
the thing
and
can
you
be,
can it messes with your blood pressure also. Gives you
yeah.
hypertension. Mm.
So we need to look at biological stuff, because I remember I was watching this one movie. Well, it wasn't a movie. It's actually like um undiagnosed something crap, whatever that was. Um, and this lady was having like intermittent explosive behaviors, and people was like, you would never know when she was going to be set off. Come to find out, something wasn't working correctly in her adrenal gland, and so adrenaline was dripping in her system intermittently. So when she started having those explosions, it was because of her adrenal gland. So, but what we'll do is say, intermittent explosive, here's some medication. So biological things need to be ruled out, when it comes to certain behaviors too, which is why I'm getting my brain scan done to see.
So I
Because
gotta ask, so may I ask you a question because the brain scan. It's I know a sister right now, and she's been diagnosed for many years. She's around our age. She's been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and
Mhm,
she was telling me that she was going for a brain scan because
mhm,
she had this ringing in her ear for a long time.
mhm,
So she said that she had to sit in this machine, like a
mhm,
CAT scan of her brain for like 45 minutes. She couldn't do it because she has a lot of paranoia and stuff, right?
mhm,
I was I was telling her that the reason why the doctor could be scanning her brain because she's been dealing with schizophrenia for a long time, and I know that schizophrenia it messes with the brain. I know it does that, right? So I told her that's probably the reason why she's trying to figure out why the doctor wanted to scan her brain and things like this. And I was telling her that, you have schizophrenia for like maybe over 20 or 30 years. Maybe
mhm,
the doctors just want to check. The ring in your ear could be related to either the medication you're taking for
mhm.
schizophrenia, or maybe it could be something chemically,
Yeah.
going on. Now why your ear is ringing and doctors want to check these stuff. Is this true?
Yeah. So the reason why I'm getting my brain scanned is because a few years ago I found out that I was exposed to carbon monoxide continuously. I didn't know. And I know that it had to be for years because I was experiencing headaches a lot. And no one, like, so I was exposed to it basically for years. But what I do remember is I didn't start really having depressive symptoms until I moved in this home. So now that that has been corrected, I'm going to go see if being exposed have left some residual like toxic stuff on my brain is why I'm continuously experiencing depression. Or is it that I just clinically have depression? And is there other ways that I can deal with it? Like, I don't sleep well at night. I have trouble sleeping. And they gave me trazodone and melatonin. It worked, but I don't like it. And one thing,
Melatonin is natural though. I take melatonin every night. It's
yeah, you
natural.
shouldn't. You shouldn't. I'm gonna tell you why. Because when you
Mm.
take medications that your body already naturally produces and then start using it, your brain actually stops making it. So if you was to try to stop, you probably wouldn't be able to sleep because your brain is no longer going to make it because you're taking a medication for it. However, what I did start taking, which actually works wonder, is magnesium. A doctor was like, "Listen, you probably got low magnesium. Take this." I sleep fine. I sleep
Mm.
fine. Sleep
I
fine.
mean, there's a number of reasons why people got insomnia. That's insomnia, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes stress, sometimes working late on the phone, like the lights from the phone and all that stuff keep you up at night. People up at night and things like that.
But
Uh,
Americans have poor diets, period. A lot of times, a lot of things is just we have deficiencies too. They've been going on for so long.
um, so let's wrap it up. We did a good hour. Do you want to have any closing statements about trauma and child development? Because I'm actually doing a series is going to be on Islamic child psychology based on children and child raising and things like that. So with our people, trauma is a big factor in the Black community. I know there's a lot of things in the Black community we find as funny or cute, like you said, when the mom threatened to beat the kids and things like that. But sometimes we have to look at it from a Islamic perspective and from a psychologist perspective. Is this really good? How this affect the child, the behavior? How does what type of results you want to get from this type of behavior with the child? Do you want
Yeah.
to have some closing statements, or I mean, argument? I mean, yeah,
You said
statements
argument
about.
like we're in a court of law. What
Yeah, because I was in court yesterday. Every time we talk, it's like I was in the court the day before and stuff like that. Online, actually, was the court.
So one of the things that I will say is, one thing I wanted to say is that I don't know what made me just think about that. I guess Allahu Alam. But one of the things that I like to say to parents too is, don't if your child come home and they say, "Oh," your daughter say, "Oh, this boy hit me," or your son said, "Oh, this little girl hit me." Don't say they hit you because they like you. You just taught that your child that when somebody like you, they're gonna abuse you. No, they hit you because they're a jerk. That's why they hit you. People should keep their hands to themselves. It's not appropriate. Because you got to remember with children, because their cognitions are limited, they're making associations in life about what life is. So when you tell them something, they're making associations. The whole thing, do as I say, not as I do. They don't work. I wish people stop saying it. That's not real. Because at the end of the day, you have to model what it is that you want your child to do. Because I say this all the time. When people say, when you know better, you do better. That's not true. It's not true. Do you not think that drug addicts know that they shouldn't use drugs? Yes, they know. Are they doing better? No. And it's not because they don't want to. They don't know how to. If I've been using drugs for 10, 20 years, I don't know life without it. And then don't make it that I grew up in a household who used drugs, because then I was exposed to it for the other 10 years. I don't know how. You're asking me to do something that I don't know how to do. And to give you an example, is anyone who doesn't know how to cook. If somebody told you, "Oh, you hungry? Go cook some food." You're like, "I don't know how to cook. I know I should cook. I know I need to cook so I can eat, but I don't know how to. I know how to turn on the stove." People, because they try to simplify stuff to mundane things where, yes, a kid can put a pot on the stove, but it only means they know how to cook a good meal, a healthy meal, a well balanced meal. So no, it's abusive. Period. Just cut it out of your vocabulary. If you know better, you can do better, because that ain't true. It's a lie. It is a lie that I feel like is oppressive from um people who oppress people. I'm just gonna say it like that. People who oppress people. They tell you, if you know better, you can do better. You need to work, 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 so they can get rich. But that's another topic for another day. But also too, just making sure that when you're talking to your kids, when I say talking, I mean actually like talking, make sure you're explaining what they did wrong and telling them what they could have done differently. We just start yelling and saying, "What, you stupid?" Now it's like, yeah, I guess I am stupid because I did it. So you got to be mindful of how you speak to children. And I'm gonna leave it, and I'm gonna have this closing remark. A study was done of two plants, where one plant, the person spoke life into the plant, like, hey, you're gonna grow, you're gonna do. And the other plant, they literally said negative stuff to the plant. The one that they spoke negative plants to, even though they watered it, got sunlight and everything, still died. So if a plant that doesn't even understand words will die from the words that are spoken, how much more with a human being, where we actually know? Because what we don't understand too is words and the energy that, like, we're spiritual beings, and the energy that comes from your body speaks death or life into people.
Very, very true. Thank you for your time. And for any of our guests, the sister has a Facebook page, and she also have Instagram. Um, and I would leave your social media in the description of this video for those who want to follow you. All right. So, Sister Barakallahu Fiq, may Allah reward you for the time you gave us.
Like, so assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Abu Bara. I am the founder of Black American Muslim Opinions. We are just getting started. Our mission is to openly discuss and examine social issues faced by Black Americans in their communities and formulate solutions that can be implemented in these communities from an Islamic perspective. We need your support to keep the organization going. Your donations will help us do the work necessary to help Black people overcome their social and economic challenges. Visit our website and learn more about what we do.